Hey, what's up? This is Harry Wagner from Harry's Situations, and today I want to talk to you about what air pressure you should run on the trail. This is one of the most common questions I get. When people are new to off-roading, they usually start with street pressure. Someone tells them, oh, you have to air down. And so the next question is, air down to what? Everyone wants a number, but really we're going to talk today about the different factors that play into what that number is. They include things like wheel width, sidewall height, vehicle weight, terrain, and so much more. If you don't want to listen to all that, fast forward to the end. I will give you a number that you should run on the trail, but trust me, you're going to want to watch this and learn more. You will notice that both of these tires behind me are Nitto tires. This video is actually brought to you by Nitto. They make tires in just about every size and tread pattern for any vehicle you might own. Check them out at nittotire.com. I guarantee they have something that would fit your vehicle. And if you like what we're doing here, please subscribe to the Driving Line channel so you don't miss any of these videos in the future. Before we can get into what pressure you should run on the trail, we need to back up a little bit, roll it back, and talk about what pressure you should run on the street. Now, a good place to start is the door placard that tells you what the manufacturer recommends for your tire pressure. That might vary a little bit if you've changed your tire size, if you've added a bunch of things to your vehicle to make it heavier, but it's a good starting point. One way you can tell what pressure to run on the street is you can do a chalk test. So if you go across the tread surface and vary the air pressure, you want to have an even contact patch across here on the street. Now, I'll honestly often err on the side of higher pressure, and there's some trade-offs there. Everything we're talking about here is going to have compromises. So if I run increased air pressure, my ride might be a little stiffer, and the center of the tread might wear out a little sooner, but I probably am going to get better fuel economy because I have less rolling resistance. So with fuel at $5 a gallon, I'm willing to make those compromises in things like tread life or even in terms of ride quality, just to get 1 or 2 miles per gallon better at the pump. When we talk about lowering our air pressure, a lot of people are concerned about a tire coming off of the bead, and this is a valid concern. It could cause a loss of control, but most people haven't experienced that. It usually only happens at very low air pressures, like single-digit air pressures without beadlock wheels. What keeps your tire on the wheel is this inner bead here. So the air pressure pushes out against the edge of the wheel, and then there's this inner bead surface here that keeps the tire from coming off. So you never have to worry about the tire going beyond the rim, but it can go inside. Typically this happens at the outside surface, like if you're in the sand and you're carving, all the pressure is on that outside front tire as you turn. That could cause the bead to peel off the wheel. Some people will even put duct tape inside here and basically build up this bead surface to keep the tire from going in further. Obviously, a lot of people, when we talk about low air pressure, think about beadlock wheels. Honestly, I run them. They take extra maintenance. They're heavier. They're more expensive. I think a lot of people have beadlock wheels that really don't need them. I've been rock crawling for years. You can see how beat up this wheel is. It's a non-beadlock wheel, and I never lost a bead. If you do have a tire come off the bead, what you want to do is stop moving immediately so you don't tear up that tire. You need to take the pressure off that corner of the vehicle and then reseat the bead. Now, if you're in something like dirt, this is usually typically pretty easy. Sand is more complicated, mud even more complicated yet, because that mud will get all inside between the tire and the rim. It makes it really hard to reseat. So you need to clean that area really well. And then what you want to do is add a quick blast of air to push the tire out and reseat it on the wheel. Now, if you have something like an air tank, a CO2 tank, or your onboard air uses a tank that reserves a lot of air, it's easy to get that quick burst. If you just have an air compressor with no tank, it can be a little more difficult. In that case, you might need to put a ratchet strap around the circumference of the tire, tighten it down a little bit. This will push the bead to the outside. That's not going anywhere, and that'll help reseat it. Now make sure you release the pressure on that ratchet strap once the tire seats, because it's going to want to inflate and it's going to get bigger and bind up that strap. But all in all, that is not something you really need to be concerned about. There's a few things we need to be concerned about if we run extremely low air pressure. One is losing the tire bead off the wheel. Another one that in my mind is even more serious is a pinch flat. So a pinch flat is when the tire compresses so much when you go over an obstacle that basically that obstacle contacts the wheel and it cuts the tire. This means you need to buy a new tire, so it's definitely something we want to avoid. The higher the speeds, the more air pressure I recommend you run. The last thing we need to be concerned about when we're running too low of air pressure is driving on the street. So when we have low air pressure, one of the things we're after is that increased contact patch that helps our vehicle ride smoother, float over terrain like snow or sand, and conform to the terrain for more traction. But if you're running low air pressure on the street, there's a lot of rolling resistance. All that resistance builds up heat, and heat can cause the tire to fail. So anytime you're on the pavement, you don't want to run low air pressure. You want to run what's on the door placard or you've determined is the best for your vehicle. Otherwise, you might experience a tire failure. So let's go to the other end of the spectrum and talk about what can happen if you run too high of air pressure. Well, there's really not too many downsides. You might have a rougher ride. You might not have enough traction to make it up obstacles. In those cases, you can adjust the pressure in order to account for those situations, but there's really not much harm in starting on the high side with air pressure and incrementally lowering it until you get the desired performance that you want. The advantages to lowering your tire pressure on the trail are increased traction, better compliance with terrain to make the ride smoother, and a wider footprint that really comes into play in soft terrain and it'll help you float. One of the biggest factors in determining the right air pressure is the terrain that you're in. So if I'm on washboard road, or even when I'm rock crawling, I'll probably air down to say 15 PSI in my Jeep. I normally run 30 PSI on the road. So I cut that pressure in half and that really smooths out the ride. I don't go much lower in the rocks because then you start to worry about ground clearance as a trade-off to increasing your traction or having a wider footprint. Now in terrain like sand or snow, where I'm worried about getting stuck and getting buried, I'll run single-digit air pressure if I have Beadlock wheels all day long. Other factors in what air pressure you can run are the tire construction. So a stiffer tire will often need less air pressure in order to spread out and have the same contact patch as a tire with lighter weight construction. And this is a bit of a trade-off because we think of that lighter weight tire can hold more air, but the stiffer tire often will want to come off the bead easier than that softer tire will that can comply with the terrain. So a bit of a trade-off here. You can run low air pressure in, say, your load range E tires, but be careful if you run too low of air pressure, that stiff tire might want to come off the bead. Rim width relative to tire width is something most people don't think about. If you go to nittotire.com, they have a range of wheel width that they recommend for each tire application. And if you have a fairly short sidewall, that range might only be 1 inch or a ½ inch. If you have a real tall sidewall, like this 37-inch Recon Grappler for a 17-inch rim, it has about a 2½ inch range. And the reason why is you have all of this distance in order to make up the difference between the wheel and the tire. Now this distance is going to let you air down more because there's more sidewall here to comply with the terrain. I usually run these on a narrower rim, on the narrow side of what's recommended. And the reason being is if you think about pinching that tire more with a narrower rim, it's going to push out against the bead surface more, and you can run a lower air pressure even without beadlock rims without being concerned about de-beading the tire. If you're still watching, hopefully you've learned a thing or two about what air pressure you want to run and the different factors that you would take into consideration when making that determination. Now, if you just fast forward to this point, I think you're safe cutting whatever pressure you run on the street in half on the trail. So if you run 40 PSI in your tires on the road, you can safely run 20 PSI on the trail without concern. Something like my Ram that weighs 10,000 pounds, I run 60 PSI on the road. I'll actually air it down to 30 PSI, which 30 PSI is what I run my Jeep tires at when they're inflated. So it's all relative, but that's an easy way to determine what pressure you can run with very little risk. Hopefully you feel empowered to air your tires down when you get to the trailhead and you've learned a thing or two from this video. Is there anything I forgot when it comes to tire tech and airing down for the trail? Comment below and let me know. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Thanks for watching Driving Line. If you guys like this video, consider subscribing to our channel so you'll never miss any of the content we create here. Whether you're into trucks, Jeeps, imports, domestic vehicles, or anything in between, we are here to fuel your passion. So hit that subscribe button and we'll see you guys next time.